Okay, so I'll put this up as a video on my website. Again, I have a website. I have a link to it on my. I have a link to it on my website. It says Immersion English Institutes.com. And then one of the links on that front page is for our website, English for Russian speakers. Okay, if you haven't seen that already. If you are not signed up for our WhatsApp site, you can send me an email and or send it on WhatsApp if you. My phone number I use for it is 8705-1825-705. So you can send it by phone, on your phone or on WhatsApp or whatever. And I'll get you linked up to our WhatsApp site. And because I put a lot of information on that. Okay, so I want to discuss these. These are all verbs, but some of them can be nouns too. I'll explain in that. Okay, so like I said, each pair is somewhat related. So, for example, discuss and explain. What would be the difference? Anybody know what the difference is? Discuss and explain. They're both talking. So discussing is like we all talking about something, for example.
When explain, you telling us.
That's right. So as a teacher, I may explain this. Or if we all participate in talking, then we're discussing. Scare and surprise. Boom! How you might scare somebody. It would also be surprised if you did that. Surprised when I did that. But scare suggests that they are frightened a little bit when you do it. So you might, hello. And so the scare reflects some fright. Surprise may not. We frequently have a surprise party for somebody. So they don't know they're going to have a party. They were going to have a party, and then they walk home and open the door. Surprise! Happy birthday! I mean, that's a surprise, but they're not scared by it, I hope. Right? So similar, they kind of overlap a little bit. Somebody who gets, if you surprise somebody when they're not expecting it, they might be scared. Okay? But so they kind of relate to each other. Again, they're not exactly synonyms, but they overlap a little bit. Okay. I like to teach it this way so that people can, when you link words, they're easier to remember. And if you remember one, then you remember the other one. Plus, like I said, we will on Thursday use these words when we play a game of concentration. Discover and detect are. Anybody want to explain the difference between discover and detect?
Discover, like finding a planet or solar system. Discover it's like finding something like a planet or solar system.
It can be. Yeah. I mean, in some degree, again, they can be overlap in some areas, but not a lot. So yeah, you might discover a planet. You're right. On the other hand, if you were, let's say you, at times, for example, the NASA in America or the other similar organizations might detect an asteroid coming towards us. Okay, so they can't see it right away, then they detect it, and then they decide, okay, they're gonna hit us, what are we gonna do about it? If it's coming our direction, so detecting and discovering they do overlap somewhat, but you might use it a little bit different. And, for example, again, if you get arrested for whatever, robbery, and they take you in, there is a discovery process. Both the detectives, similar word, right? The detectives look for evidence that you committed the crime. And they call a period of time the discovery, so that you kind of you show your evidence, and so that both sides can prepare for the trial. So, like I say, a detective obviously detects, right? That's why they call him a detective. So he's going out looking for evidence. So, the definition of both of them is a little bit broader. For example, that's not just scientists or cosmologists or something detecting or discovering, but they do discover, right? And in the process of discovering, sometimes they're detecting things. So they have some overlap, not perfect, but so they're not total synonyms, but there's some partial synonyms. One challenge in learning a new language are the nuances. When do we use this and when do we use this? And you may not be able to tell from a dictionary. There's some of the nuances of a word are subtle. And native speakers understand it because they grew up, speaking the language. And so those subtleties are easier for somebody who's a native speaker. But it may take a long time to understand some of those subtleties of a language. Chase and catch. What's the difference between that? Chase and catch. Anybody want to offer? Let's try to get somebody who's not American. Okay. They're kind of, in some ways, well, so chase, you're running after somebody, let's say. You're chasing them. Okay, a criminal, whatever, somebody steals your purse, you're running after them. And when you get to them, you catch them. Okay, so when you chase them, then you catch them. Okay, so they're not much overlap at all. They're two steps of a process. You chase them, then catch them. Okay. Argue and debate. How much overlap do we have there?
Argue like a conflict. Conflict, argue. No.
To argue and debate.
It's kind of splitting. Trying to find out something.
Again, those two they overlap a lot. When you debate, that's like a competition. I was a debater in high school, and I studied debate at the university. Within debate, you make arguments. Okay, now, I also make arguments sometimes with my wife. That's not a formal debate. That's just daily argument. We should do this, we should do that, whatever. Okay, so you can have an argument, with your spouse or whatever. You could call it a debate. The debate is a little more, the nuance of it is that's more formal. That there's, international competitions in debates. They're not international competitions in arguing. But within debate, you do argue. Okay, you make your arguments, you show your evidence and so forth. So they're quite closely related. Hello, Dalit. Okay, arrest and jail. What do those mean? Anybody want to tell us what arrest and jail means? Again, these are verbs. Jail is also a noun. An arrest can be a noun. You can make an arrest. You can put somebody in jail. Okay, so they are both nouns and verbs. But as verbs, anybody want to explain the difference, or anybody know the difference? No, you can do it.
Wait, which one are we doing?
Arrest and jail.
Arrest and jail. So
That's
arrest.
now, verbs in it.
Okay, so arrest is like to, let's say hypothetically, you put someone in cuffs. Like you got them in the back of your
Some
cop
chairs-
car, you have them arrested.
The chair
And
back to
jail
back.
is where they go after you get them arrested.
Prison.
Prison, jail.
Yeah, jail is usually local, and a prison is bigger, and maybe, there might be one prison in a state, or, in a province.
Yeah.
Where a jail, there's a jail in a lot of cities. However, sometimes, so jail as a verb is you're putting somebody in jail, you jail them. So, if you use the verb, prison has a related verb, imprison. You imprison somebody, you put them in prison. And so jail can be the place, and it can also be what you do, you jail them. You put them in jail until you can go to a court, talk to a judge, and so forth. Okay, bathe and shower. You get wet both places. But what's the difference between bathing and showering? Okay, the showers come down from the top, right? Bathing, you're sitting down in a tub or something, right, in the bath. So you end up with the same results basically, but but they are different. So these ones are not at all synonyms, except in the most vaguest way, but they're related. You're getting the same results done. Fire and blaze. Fire and blaze. These are now nouns now. So these are not verbs. Most of these are verbs, but those two are nouns. So fire and blaze. Anybody know? Anybody know one of them? Anybody want to explain one? Okay, what's a fire?
Fire is something smaller, blaze is something bigger.
Yeah. And blaze can be synonymous. Okay. Blaze may suggest maybe a larger fire, but not exactly. It can be used synonymously, but it can also maybe just have a little bit of an innuendo of maybe something bigger. Fry and cook. Go back to verbs again. Fry and cook.
Frying in oil.
Probably oil, yeah. So the frying is on top of the stove, and you probably put some oil, butter, something in it so it doesn't burn. And so you're cooking a hamburger or a steak or something, eggs, you're frying them on top in some sort of a pan. We call the pan a frying pan in America. So if it's big, fairly big and kind of short with a handle in it, that's a frying pan. But cook. So cook is much more, is broader. Frying is cooking, boiling is cooking, baking is cooking, broiling is cooking. Okay, so it's however you prepare something with heat. Basically, you're cooking it. So frying is just one type of cooking. Okay? So they're not synonymous, but they certainly are related. Lecture and instruct. The same? Or anybody want to define one of them? And then we'll talk about the other one. So lecture is, we already talked about it, really. What I'm doing, right? I'm lecturing. And instruct. Yeah, lecture is instructing, but we could instruct in other ways. So, we could have some active instruction. For example, on Thursdays, I've been doing some action instruction. So we're doing like exercises. And so I'm doing, Ken says run, Ken says jog, Ken says hop. Okay, so that's still instructing, but it's not lecturing. So instructing is broader than lecturing, but lecturing is a very common way of instructing. Coach and educate, kind of in the same realm. So what's the difference between coach and educate?
We use coach
What do you think?
in the sport, coach in the sport, education.
It's best known there, but actually if you,
Yeah, based
with
on
corporations and
professional-
stuff, corporations sometimes hire coaches to help train their people, and coachings suggest a little more hands-on. Here, do it this way, So, in American football, this is how how to block, and you show them, and so you are instructing them, or you're demonstrating, you're having them practice and so forth. So yeah, it's most commonly used as what when you're coaching, you're teaching sports a lot of times. But more and more that word is being used in the business place. You sometimes need a coach to help people gain the tools, the skills they need to do the job. So you can have a business coach as well. Educate, I've never heard that used in the sports world, I don't think. So maybe you could, but it would be odd to use educate when you're talking about football. So probably not. So coaching is a type of educating, very much used in the sports world. But it can be broader than that. Educate is more, a classroom scenario or whatever, not used in the sports world. I won't say ever, but it'd be hardly ever, almost never. Encourage and support.
Encourage like motivated. Encourage like a motivated.
Motivating. Yeah. Motivation.
To motivate.
Motivate, okay, all right, motivate, yeah, okay, yeah. There are other ways, motivating, and there's different ways of doing it. Motivating, a teacher can motivate, a parent can motivate. You go to bed now, or you're not gonna go out with your friends for the next week. That's motivating, right? And you can, at what point do you suppose would support overlap with encourage?
Helping to.
It helps motivate. It may also, for example, a few years ago, I started a program to support NGOs. And we ultimately got like $10 million, mostly from USAID, to do training, in some cases give mini grants, stuff like that. So we were supporting. And you could say we were obviously encouraging if we were giving away some mini grants and they enjoyed the conferences we invited them to, and we wrote a book every year about the best practices of NGO work in Central Asia. And so there's some overlap, but not necessarily a lot. But even where this could be supporting, right? If you're the fans in the stadium and you have a football game going down here in the main stadium, and they're yelling and clapping and so forth, well, they are encouraging their team to do better. So they are motivating, encouraging the people. So clapping and applauding so you don't necessarily have to do it by words. Again, there's different ways that you can encourage people to do better. Groan and sigh. Anybody know what either of those is? Anybody? That's a sigh. There you go. So yeah, they're both kind of a sound you make with pushing some air through your lungs and stuff. So is a sigh, is a groan. So it kind of they're both noises and expressions, but they're not synonyms. But so one is a little breathier. You have a thought on it? You're thinking about it. What? Oh, I missed one. Yeah, so anyway, that's my best impersonation of a groan and a sigh. Just a lot of air in the sigh. Oh, I can't believe you guys don't know this stuff. Whatever. Or groan. Kind of a little more perturbed, whatever. They're interesting words. I jumped over employ and work. So are those synonyms? They're kind of close, right? But they're not quite. In fact, if I employ somebody, I put them to work and pay them. Okay. Of course, we can also work. I work at my home a lot, and nobody pays me. And so work is kind of what you do. If you're employed, you work. You may work, if you're not employed, just because you enjoy it, or whatever, or you're fixing up your yard, you're fixing up your home, whatever. So the effort you make is work, whether or not you're paid. But if you're employed, then you're going to get paid. So they're not quite, they're in the same ballpark again. So they're related to each other, but they're not synonyms. Okay. Explode and bomb. How do those relate? Are they synonyms? Well, it's a little bit like employ and work. A bomb explodes. So they're not. There could be something else that explodes though. If you have a car accident and fire gets to the gas and so forth, then you have a homemade bomb, basically. And so other things can explode. Gas lines sometimes explode, so forth. So the explosion is what results from a bomb or something else. So, right? So they're not really synonyms, but almost kind of like bomb. Well, let's go back to the verbs though, because I basically just use that and explain that as a noun, but it is used as a verb too. So, for example, my dad fought in World War II in a B-17 bomber, flying over Germany and Poland, dropping bombs on the Nazi war machines, on their fuel tanks, on their. One of the things they went after was ball bearings. You know what ball bearings are? They're like little round balls that help something go around without causing damage in the circulation of it. The ball bearing is tiny, tiny balls, you might say, but they're to help, like a car. I don't know if they have them now. It has ball bearings in cars. I don't know, but in tanks and stuff, at least during World War II, you couldn't have a tank if you didn't have ball bearings. That's why my dad would go after the ball bearing plants. If they destroyed the ball bearings, the Germans couldn't make tanks. It's a very small part, but it's an important part. And then, like I say, the fuel lines and stuff. So they bombed the German, key infrastructure during World War II. And the bombs would hit and explode. So the bomb is a noun, but it's also the verb, the action of dropping the bombs, like from the B-17s, is bombing them. So it's a verb. Okay, we already went chase and catch. Do I have it two places, or do they just go there once? Okay. Rub and stroke. That's a rub, but it may also be considered a stroke. So a stroke can be, if you have bruised yourself somehow, if you hurt yourself, if I knock my head on the covers, which I do frequently, I may go, and I groan, and I rub my head. I could say I stroke my head. It's kind of the same action, rubbing maybe a little bit more than just stroke seems to me like going in one direction a little bit. You could also stroke in a romantic setting. You could stroke a person, but it's kind of the same thing. So it is overlapping quite a bit. But rubbing to me is a little more vigorous and suggests that there's a pain involved that you're trying to get rid of. Stroking may relate to a pain, and may not relate to a pain. Okay, pretend and perform. You may want to at least tell us what one of them is.
Pretend, it's like be someone.
Pretend, you can pretend to be somebody. If you're pretending on a stage, what are you doing? You're performing, right? So, if you're doing a theater, then you are performing because you have an audience and so forth, and you are pretending during that. You're pretending that you're somebody that makes the play interesting. So perform can be theatrical. However, you also perform in a different way. We use it sometimes when we talk about football. How did they perform? Like we just had the Super Bowl in America. And the question a lot of people are discussing now is the San Francisco 49ers have a very young quarterback. And they're discussing how did he perform. They lost because they were playing a team that has won 3 of the last 4, I guess. And they have the quarterback who does the passing and stuff like that in American football, and they consider him the best, one of the best ever, and definitely the best now. And so the 49ers were ahead, and then along came the superstar that beat them barely. But the question is, how did the new kid perform? So that's not acting, it's the function, he's an actor. So you could use perform in asking that question of how did he perform in the game? How did he do? Did he do badly? Did he do well? And actually they're having an argument. There's a lot of people right now are arguing about whether he did well or bad, whatever. So perform it can be somewhat broader And in that sense, not really pretending. You're performing in a real life situation and trying to excel in that situation. Radiate and sparkle.
Sparkle like water. Sparkle.
No.
Water.
That kind of sparkle. Ni gabezorový, ni другой sparkle.
Sparkling. Sparkling.
Yeah, you do have water that they refer to as, you know, sparkling water or whatever. As a noun, well, let's stay at the verb second. Radiate, they definitely do overlap a little bit. So stars radiate, literally, there's radiation coming from stars. So in that sense, it's, you know, it's definitely they radiate because they emit radiation. And you could say more of a reflection. Normally you would talk about sparkle, maybe a little more from a reflection. But that's not, I don't know, sparkle sometimes suggests a flickering, like the lights on a Christmas tree flicker, and so we talk about them sparkle. I don't know, any other of the missionaries want to? What do you think? What's there, sparkle and radiance? Sparkle, how would you define sparkle?
Sparkle, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like a slight little bit of light. Like when you think about like a star, it sparkles, right?
Yeah, you see it, stars, if they're a star, they have a little bit of twinkling in them. So they might be more of a sparkle than a planet that typically doesn't.
I don't know how to explain this in like really simple terms. Sparkle is just kind of like little lights that kind of like flash a little bit. Just like a little bit of a like shiny look almost.
Mhm.
And then like I guess you can explain have you explained radiate? Yeah.
Well, basically, I tied it in with radiation, so definitely stars radiate, they emit light, and radiation. So those words are tied together.
Yeah. Radiate is just to like bring us light.
Yeah.
Bring us its
There's one area where they definitely overlap. And that is when you use it to describe somebody that has a sparkly personality. You know, there are people like that, they just sparkle. They radiate light. And I think it's, I think they've actually done some studies on this, and when they show infrared on somebody, they actually can tell the difference. There are people that literally radiate more than other people when they look at them under infrared. But we all know people who kind of sparkle, but their personality is sparkly and they're fun to be around. And they even, their faces sparkle a little bit, you know, radiate a little bit. We have missionaries here. When I was a leader in a local branch of the church, there was a young lady who, well, there are actually two young ladies that are part of the story. One young lady didn't think she had a lot of friends. She was unhappy and she tried to kill herself. She split her wrist. And so I visited her in the hospital and so forth. And that got me thinking about the other young lady who I thought might have the same problem. And indeed, when I met with her, she said she wished she would die. She didn't want to be alive. She also was miserable. And so I challenged her to quit her job. She had a fairly good paying job, right? I challenged her to quit your job and become a missionary. And so 18 months later, she came back from her mission. She accepted my challenge. And 18 months later, she sparkled. Absolutely. In fact, I was standing at the top, in the front of the church, and I'd asked somebody, who is that? A bunch of people were gathered around this young lady, and she was, and everybody was excited and everything. That, who is that? So that's so-and-so. They just got back from her mission. Wow, I couldn't even recognize her. She hadn't really changed physically. She was a little bit overweight when she left. She was a little bit overweight when she came back, but she sparkled. And, so I say in personalities and stuff, I think it's a real thing. Mate and marry. Anybody?
Missioners?
Yeah, that one.
Missioners?
Mate and marry?
Like, animals mate, humans marry.
How do you?
Animals aren't, they don't get married.
Yeah, cows and horses and stuff mate, and they, have babies, whatever, colts and so forth. We would call that mating, but they don't usually marry each other. We don't refer to them as being married, although some people say, what are the geese that are, and well.
Eagles, all eagles.
Oh, and I think penguins.
Penguins,
Yeah.
yes, they give each other a rock.
So there are some animals who mate for life, so maybe they are married. But we normally say that for humans. But, itch and scratch. Itch and scratch. Anybody have a clue in either one of them? If you get bit by a mosquito or something like that, it will itch and you will scratch it. However, sometimes we do include them as synonyms. Some we say we itch it. We itch. But really it may be misused a little bit. The bite itches and then we scratch it. So, but sometimes we use them as synonyms, but not. I would say it's better to keep them separately. So itching is what the bite does, the insect does, scratching is what you do in response to it. And of course, other things cause itching too, not just bites. But whenever you have to start scratching, you're itching. So your body's itching, so you scratch. Shout and yell. Okay, we throw scream in there too. So shout, yell, scream. What's the difference? So we could add a third one in there. I think shout and yell a little bit more synonymous. Scream.
Scream is more involving, louder, more intense, I would say.
Yeah. I definitely relate it more to women than men.
Yeah.
It's a higher, they emit a higher pitch. And so that's, to me, more of a scream.
Yeah.
But it's used in literature and stuff as men can scream. But we normally think we're more manly if we yell. So it's, they're very, very similar. Shout and yell, I'd say, are synonymous, don't you think?
Yeah.
I don't see any difference between shout and yell. Same thing. And sometimes the shout or yell would be more likely to be something where you're trying to get somebody's attention. You might even be if you're a fan and you might yell your support for the team or whatever, you can yell in that situation. Or if you're out climbing the mountain and you start to fall down, you might yell to somebody else, help, come help me. I'm gonna fall off the cliff. So you're shouting or yelling, and maybe in that case, if you're terrified, then it might raise to a scream. And probably really literally will be a little bit higher pitch. If you're really panicking, you may sound a little more like a woman. Let me put it that way. So, because now you're scared. And so your throat starts to tighten up, and it may sound a little more like a woman's scream. Screaming, women very frequently scream at, the boo sort of surprise. They'll scream. Most men, some do. But a little more, what women do, I would call screaming more often. Call and phone as a verb, not as a noun, but as a verb.
Or like a hey.
Well,
Take attention.
call can be like a yell, for example, but call is in English. If I call somebody, that probably means I'm phoning them. Okay, so unless I'm calling out to somebody, then I'm shouting at them, yelling at them. So to call somebody and to phone somebody is synonymous largely, but call can be broader. Calling can be like a yell. So calling is a little broader, but it is probably more often used when we talk about phoning somebody. I'd say more than half the time we say, I'm calling somebody. And everybody understands by the context that we're phoning. So very common to use as a synonym. Hug and kiss.
By hand, by lips.
No, hug and kiss, right? Joke and amuse. As verbs. Good. I just want to check. I am recording this, so I'm going to put that up on my website, so you can go through this again sometime. Okay, so joking with somebody, like telling them a joke, or it may not be a joke per se, like not joke. We frequently think of kind of like a story, a funny story, right? And that would be amusing also. Joke can be just like just maybe using a turn of a phrase or something in how you talk to somebody. It's not really a joke, but you expect somebody to laugh. It might, so a joke does not have to be just words. You can play a joke. Sometimes talk about playing a joke on somebody, and that could be where you're surprising them. Okay, where you're trying to scare them. You're playing a joke on them. Anybody want to add anything to Americans? Anybody want to add their 2 cents on to joke?
I mean, Elder Frederickson does funny, so it's not.
Yes, I do.
I would say joke could be mean, could be funny if you want. But to amuse, I would say
That'd be like,
it's always a good thing, always funny, always happy, sort of joking, messing around, laughing.
like amusing people would be like a performer, like a comedian amuses people, they make them laugh, make them, they tell jokes and stuff like that. Like, I think, like, on a fit, like, talking sense, you'd use the word joke, but I think more of on, like, when it comes to physically, like playing a joke on someone, I think it's more common, at least where I'm from, in a younger term, it's like playing a prank. So I think that's usually what you use for a term, pranking someone.
Yeah, and that would be then, and actually, in either of those cases, it's being used as a noun. You play a joke on somebody, you play a prank on somebody. Now you're doing something to make them laugh or make them, maybe you are surprising them, your child thinking, your man scream. And then laugh and chuckle are kind of levels of laughing. Like chuckle is, it's very light laughter. So laugh can be quite hard until you cry. Not laugh until I've cried before. I mean, it's not, yeah. There's a movie that whenever, at the ending of it, to me, it's a perfect movie. At the end of, by the end of it, I'm laughing and crying at the same time. Beautiful movie. If anybody seen it, it's called Steel Magnolias. Very funny, but also sad. And so I'm sitting there watching it. I can't find it any place on to watch it again. I really want to cry and laugh again at the same time. Okay, so a chuckle is kind of a light laugh. Clap and applaud, where I talked about. Applauding is clapping, like, but it's somewhat purposeful, at a theater, so forth. Applauding is clapping. Clapping may not be applauding. Maybe slightly, might not. Applauding suggests, kind of a longer term clapping, right? But you can't just go like that. That's a clap. And I do that sometimes just to get somebody's attention. I can clap pretty loud and just one is enough. So it's not exactly, that's not applauding. And I'm not sure at what point it becomes applauding, but it's kind of the scenario of that you are sustaining the clap. But applauding is a type of clapping, but it's sustained clapping for a purpose. So very close. Okay, last one. About time for the missionary to take over and have some fun. Breathe and smell.
When you smell, you do both.
Yeah, you can do both at the same time. If you're breathing through your nose, then you may be smelling stuff. Or you may be so much concentrating in your breathing, you don't even notice if you're smelling anything. The smelling is the odor. You're picking up, you're sensing an odor of some kind. If you're at a gas station, maybe you're smelling gasoline, benzene. And so that's smelling. Breathing, of course, you can also breathe in your mouth, and if your mouth doesn't have, it's something, I suppose, well, you may simultaneously with your nose smell something, you don't smell with your mouth. It's a different sensation, right? So if you're breathing, out of your mouth, you're probably not, if you are smelling, you're using the nose as well. Right? So smelling is the sensing odor. And breathing is consuming oxygen. Okay. So I'm going to put this up on the website. Again, the website, in case you don't know where it's at, let me just turn to it real quick. Okay, stop the